This is Press Play on KCRW. I'm Barbara Bogave, sitting in for Madeline Brand. 25 years ago today in Beijing, hundreds of pro-democracy demonstrators lay dead in the streets, and a few thousand defenseless student protesters in the heart of the city sang the Internationale before facing down the tanks of the Chinese army. Even today, it's hard to know how many died at Tiananmen Square because the Chinese government has suppressed any discussion and research into the events of those weeks in 1989. Here in downtown LA, however, one rather unusual remembrance is underway this week. Beijing Spring is a musical about the bloody clash between student protesters and Chinese Communist Party hardliners. It's staged by East-West Players, one of the country's oldest Asian-American theater companies. Tim Dang is artistic director for East-West Players, and he wrote the book for Beijing Spring. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So why a musical about Tiananmen Square? I mean, what made you think I have to tell this story in song?
You know, this question has always come up to me, and one of the reasons why people sing in musicals is because the emotion is so high that mere words cannot express what they are saying. So they have to sing. And this particular event of 1989, I felt was so passionate, had so much emotion to it, that why not a musical? And it was actually created during the time when Les Miserables, about the French Revolution, Miss Saigon, about the Vietnam War, was being made as all sung through musicals.
Well, that makes so much sense because the staging of it is also reminiscent of Les Mis in that you use large props and you use also video projections to place people there. But I noticed that you say in the playbill to this production that you followed the student protests in 1989 like the rest of us in the media here in the States. Well, what were your impressions then that you most wanted to capture in the musical?
You know, I think as an artist, what I was watching was the celebration of the human spirit. That these young students, and I would even say naive students, went into this movement asking or requesting or demanding freedom and democracy. And I don't think they knew what they were up against. They were up against the Chinese Communist Party. They were up against the hardliners who have been in control since 1921, and now it's 1989, and they're going up against this wall, so to speak.
A wall they couldn't even see.
Exactly, exactly. And I felt that this story needed to be told, that despite the outcome of the event, that this story needs to be told and told again. But unfortunately, like you said, that China has blocked this knowledge from its youth. And there are so many young people from China today who know very little about this incident.
Well, it's interesting that the story focuses on the experience of a young protest leader, Zhang, in Beijing, and it also focuses on his father and his grandfather, who both live in another city far from the capital and who both had their own experience of revolution. So 3 generations.
Right.
With all of the other things going on in the whole story of Tiananmen Square, you also have 3 generations. Why tell the story from this multi-generational point of view?
Well, the idea that we have, and it's probably more of a Western thought that we have as Americans, and in my case, and as an Asian American, that we feel that through time, that eventually, with dialogue, through challenging leadership, that change will come. And there have been all of these other movements that have happened in China, but unfortunately, they also have been squelched. And so I thought that in 1989, with myself watching it on TV, in front of the entire world, that how could the Chinese government of the People's Republic of China, the word people is in there, have the People's Liberation Army, again, the word people again, turn against the people. That there was no way that they would turn against the people, but they did.
With the eyes of the world on them.
Exactly.
And that's a theme in the show.
Right. Yeah. And now that they have this amnesia that this event never happened. And in fact, today I actually heard that anything from search engines from Google have already been blocked off because of in advance of the of the anniversary that happens.
Well, as I was watching the show, I was wondering what a fourth generation, the son or daughter of one of these protesters, would make of the story that you tell, because the story has been repressed in China. Most of them only know the official version, and they don't have. In some ways, they have more freedoms now, but in other ways, they don't.
Right.
And they don't have the sense of hope that China's making history now. That's one of your recurring themes.
Yes. We actually have two designers who are from China who worked on the play. One did not know anything about the event and was totally shocked about the event happening once she saw all the photos and the projections that we were showing, that this actually happened.
How old is she?
She just graduated from Long Beach, so I would say that she's in her mid-20s.
So shocked.
And she was our prop person. And then we had another designer, our costume designer, and she had no problem with it because her parents were actually part of the movement in another city, not Beijing, but in another city. And so her parents were very supportive of her participating in this particular production.
So it depends it's a generational difference.
Right.
It depends whose stories you're hearing.
Right. We actually had a group of LGBT interns attend the show several nights ago, and they were very distraught. And in fact, they were actually crying because they said after 25 years, we still can't talk about it. We can talk about it here in the States, but once they go back home, it's silence again. They were also touched with the son's relationship with the father and the father's relationship with his father, and that as LGBT interns, they could never talk to their father about their feelings at all, about who they are. And that also had touched them deeply in a way that we didn't know that the show could.
Oh, well, that's so moving and surprising for you. And that is a very moving part of this production, that the older generation knows what's at risk and the younger ones don't see it. They're just pushing forward.
Right. And as the grandfather says in the play, we go on like we've had for centuries. Tomorrow, another day. So another opportunity to fight the fight.
I want to talk about the music. Musicals can go either way, right? It's a risk. It's always a risk. Yes. And you intercut scenes of students organizing the protests and making banners and very, very real and important but kind of mundane things, hashing out their strategy with scenes of the... And you intercut them with these scenes of hardline party leadership deciding how to react to the protesters. And all of this is through song. So on one hand, the music for the students is so Western. It reminded me of West Side Story. The music and the dancing.
I think that Joel Iwataki, who was the composer, that his musical style was informed by Andrew Lloyd Webber, by the creators of Les Miserables. So there was this pop rock feel, particularly for the youth. And for the hardliners, we wanted to do something that was more regimented or military.
Martial music. It was martial, right?
Exactly.
And more traditional Chinese themes.
And it had a communistic feel to it. And I think it worked really well in terms of bringing the two different generations together and how it could also clash as well.
Well, you wrote the lyrics.
Yes.
How do you write songs with words like democracy and neo-authoritarianism and ministry officials?
Well, it was very challenging, but my, I guess, role model is probably Stephen Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim is the master of lyrics and wit. In fact, Stephen actually, Mr. Sondheim, actually wrote the lyrics to West Side Story. He wrote the lyrics to Sweeney Todd. His style has probably rubbed off on me, and so whether or not I succeeded at that, I was able to utilize words like democracy and government officials, the New China News, the People's Daily, all incorporated within the music.
Well, you've been working on this show for almost as long as you've been at the East-West Players, right? You started writing it in 1993, and it first premiered in 1999.
Right.
So how has much of it changed over the years, and have you updated it for this 25th anniversary run?
We have. It was originally a 2-act play, and now it is a 1-act play. We probably cut about 20 minutes from the show and put it all into 1 act now. And much like the students who were very naive at the time of the protests, and some of them who look at it 25 years later, there is a lot more that we could have done in terms of strengthening the positions of the students and of the hardliners. And what we did as composer and lyricist was to bring a more realistic interpretation, to really show a balanced approach between the struggle that the hardliners were going through, because the hardliners were saying, we have 1 billion people to govern. The West has no idea how to govern 1 billion people.
Exactly. They have a big job there. And I found myself almost empathizing with those party officials.
Sure.
How to deal with this situation. And they're so out of touch, and it could have been very easy for you to make them more buffoonish.
Right. And that's what we did the first time around. But after all this research, there was really hard thought that went into the hardliners in terms of the decision. The decision was very hard for them to make in terms of calling for that final, the final order. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So what do you want audiences to take away from this musical that they can't get from news accounts and reading the stories in the paper today of the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen?
I think that there was so much relevance to what happened back in 1989, particularly with what happened in the Ukraine, a couple of years ago in Syria, in Egypt, that there is this human spirit, and the human spirit really wants to fight for the greater good of humankind. I think that's the reason why I'm in the nonprofit arts business. How do you tell the story in an artistic and educating way about the fight of the human spirit? And this is one of those perfect stories that really have the strength of the youth, of the next generation that's so concerned about what's going to happen to their future when they grow up. And I feel that our youth today, really have that. Our youth today really has that opportunity to make a difference in terms of what the world is going to look like for them in 20 years and 40 years.
Tim Dang, Artistic Director of East-West Players in downtown L.A., and his musical Beijing Spring runs through June 15th. Thank you so much for this. It was a delight to talk with you.
Thank you so much for bringing this up.
Star of musical theater is here. Light up
I
the
was
light.
in a musical once in high school. It's been a while.
That I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's coming up?
I was the lead in Brigadoon.